everyone. Welcome back to Between Two Coaches. We're on a mission to make fitness more human. Snark sold separately. I'm Coach Amanda, and I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, Do.
Oh, it's me. Hi, everybody. It's Coach Nick. I did it. Thank you so much for joining us. We have a great and interestingly different episode. So much fun this week. We're going to have a different and important conversation today. We're going to talk about Amanda's eating disorder story and how it informed her role as a coach and human. It's a very Amanda episode, and it's going to be great and so much fun. And we're going to give out some listener love like always. We're going to answer a question and, potentially share some grievances. But first,
We'll see how we feel in the moment.
Yeah, it's all about the moment. But first, let's how you doing, Amanda?
Honestly, physically hot. So one thing that you may not know, Nick, and everyone, dear listener and dear viewer, is that I can't turn on the air conditioner in my one-bedroom Upper West Side apartment because I'm recording right next to the air conditioner. So
Oh no, that was poor planning.
I'm recognizing that the spot in which I am situated is going to be a problem in the New York City summer. So other than being physically hot, I mean, hey, heat acclimation, it's a thing and it's happening right now. I'm doing pretty well.
Well, yeah, I mean, we can always adjust your spot so we can get rid of that air conditioning. I love learning new things about you. Now I know that you where your air conditioner is in your apartment. So another fun learning friend fact,
Yeah.
right there. So that's good. Glad things are going well. You got back to running. I saw after your half marathon, did some runs, right?
Yes, I took a week off from running.
Love that.
We love to recover. So
none of that one day BS.
Yeah. We're just shaking out the legs to see how we're feeling the day after. No, we're okay. So feeling good, feeling like we're getting back into the New York groove, the running groove, and keeping it real easy for now. Real easy, and I'm real happy about it. How about you? How was your week?
My week was fun. My daughter had her dance recital, so that was super fun to see a 5-year-old like do a little dance routine. So that was fun on a Saturday. The whole family went and we had a little fun. She does it with her bestie, so they had a lot of fun.
What kind of dance?
It was like a little bit of tap, but not tap. Like it was just like I don't know what you would call it, but it was in a dance studio and there was music and they danced.
What were the shoes? Tap shoes?
They were ballet shoes, but she wasn't necessarily doing. It was like maybe a form of ballet for like a 5-year-old.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was in dance school growing up, so
that's why I'm getting grilled.
That's why I was like, it sounds like it could be jazz or modern, but it's. I'm glad you were there, Dad.
It was great. Fun. Let's see. I shared this on my Instagram, but had a little rough May. So I think I mentioned on here I was working through an injury with my heel and Achilles, and it took about 2.5 months. I stopped working with my coach just to get a change and just to recover a little bit, and then once it recovered, I had probably the lowest mileage month of May, or just a month of mileage in probably 15 years. Just very not motivated. It would be, usually I could be excited to go out for a run, but it was like Saturday and I'd be like, no, I don't feel like going out. And I didn't. And Sunday, I'd be like, I'll make it up on Sunday. And I didn't. So, just fighting that motivational battle, but also realizing that like this is the third time I'm sort of not restarting from scratch, but like redoing running and its relationship with me, and realize that that does come with like motivational changes and feeling very unfit and working through that. And it doesn't mean anything's wrong. It just means, hey, Nick, this is your moment, this is your season of life, and to sort of embrace it. And so I started trying to share about it a little bit, because I usually disappear when I'm really low in running motivation, but trying to show up. So that's been a little hard, but working through that.
I think that everyone who's been viewing your content about your journey back to finding your joy in running and is appreciative of it. And what's most important is what you said, is that it is therapeutic to you to be honest about where you are in your fitness and your running journey. So
Yeah.
kudos to Coach Nick. Give it to him.
Well, thank you. Yeah, and that's the part, right? Like I could really beat myself up and be like, why am I not going? I'll just force this run. Like I'm losing all my fitness. Like, yeah, of course I'm losing fitness, but like I'm not gonna go force something that I'm not enjoying in the moment. So I'm gonna just embrace the moment of life, and get back in it as I can. So having fun with that. Also, big updates that I know you're all looking very interested about with the frogs, who now have a partner in crime, some birds. My backyard is turning into a zoo. I might start charging admission, but a bird's nest popped up right by my back patio. And I think I shared a video, but you could hear the birds chirping because they were just born, I think, and the frogs frogging in the background. And that was quite the interesting, you know, display of music in the backyard. My neighbor ended up pulling out about 7 new frogs from his pond. So my worst fears
Questions for
of
this
being
neighbor.
overrun with frogs and now birds, they're probably teaming up at this point. Like the birds will probably carry the frogs, and
Yeah,
like
I mean,
dive
it's
bomb.
giving very much Mary Poppins.
I'm
I
pretty sure this is my life now. So, yeah, we're there. Yeah, I just we're adding birds to the equation. I don't know what else we could throw back there, but we're just birds and frogs.
sounds hard. So I'm again,
Thanks.
I'm rooting for you, and whenever you need an outlet to share on this experience, just message somebody else. Don't let it be me.
Done and done.
Done.
Yeah,
We got some listener love this week, right?
we do.
All right, so this review comes from listener love questions. Lessons we've learned in coaching. I feel like this is a topic that can have its own episode, but maybe if we share one from Peppy Steps. Shout out to Peppy Steps.
Shout
Um,
out.
a lesson we've learned in coaching. Nick, Coach Nick, I'm gonna have you go first on this one.
Put me on point. I'm ready. I am prepared though. By saying I'm not prepared, but I actually am. Uh,
Samesies.
I think the one lesson I've sort of learned is, really, how to make sure I am supporting an athlete through it all. Like early on, it was a lot of like helping people achieve goals and like maybe putting pressure on myself to make sure they're ready for their goals and like can perform. That was pressure on me. I think by byproduct of pressure on the athlete, whether I saw it or not. And it took me a good 6 months to really just understand that it's showing up for someone in their life and being there as a partner in their journey who is helping guide it, helps them really, really get what they want out of this journey and be as prepared as possible for their races and their workouts and everything, versus like me feeling some level of pressure for them to chase the goals they want, or me feeling pressure like that, if they don't achieve their goals, like they're gonna break up with their coach, or like I'm not doing my job. And that was a lot. And it took me a little bit, but every year I've embraced more of like just showing up in people's lives and just being there as their support and like helping that through the journey, right? Like still being their coach, right? Still helping guide their training, but like, understanding moments happen, helping them adapt, helping them work through the stuff, right? That really matters. Feeling like that they aren't motivated, or feeling like their running is becoming a job, or whatever it is, right? Like those are all things that conversations that coaches can help with. We can't solve it all, but we can, by just supporting and listening, you're helping. So it's a
Yes.
long-winded way of me saying that like I understood and embraced more of this other side of running that has nothing to do with results or that stuff. Athletes will still come with goals, but like support them more than that.
The human side of fitness.
Yeah.
I would say that the one lesson that I'll share today, but I do think we'll probably do another episode that covers this more in depth, is that I am not the personal trainer, group fitness instructor, run coach for everyone. And every individual is not for me. And that's okay.
I love that. I'm changing my
Short and
answer to
sweet.
that.
Wow. Okay.
Just kidding. No, I like my answers though, but yours was really good too.
I like yours too. I
Oh,
think that
thanks.
I know I do, and I obviously co-sign it. And I think that we are both doing the very best we can to show up for our clients by being ourselves.
That's the most important part. Like you can only be yourself. So be that.
I've tried being you before, but it doesn't work. Maybe it's the hair.
I did get a haircut, as you can see if you're watching video.
I like it. I
Yeah,
like it.
thanks.
It's giving summer.
It is. It doesn't too much hair. I don't like it.
Don't start with me. Don't start with me. All right. Very good. We also have a review.
We do.
Should we share our review?
We absolutely should.
Courtney Sams,
Courtney.
she says, Nick and Amanda bring such a breath of fresh air to the running community and running podcast space. I enjoy their lighthearted humor and balanced perspectives on running. The fitness space can be incredibly toxic and elitist, and Nick and Amanda are the antithesis of that. I look forward to their podcast each week. It's quickly becoming one of my favorites.
Oh, Courtney, that's so sweet.
Thank you, Courtney. Thanks for reviewing. And also, if you, dear listener, I keep on making Bridgerton references and not fully watching the last season, but it's helping to motivate me. Speaking of motivation, if you haven't reviewed with Cinco Stars, now is the time. Yesterday was the time. Be sure to do that. We love to read those reviews online. We love to reach out to you. Send us a message on the gram, send us an email, and we will highlight you.
Yes. Thank you. And for everyone who has, thank you so much. We really appreciate it. Amanda, I am feeling like I'm grieving. I'm grieving a little bit here. A little angry, a little okay, a little unwell. I think unwell is what the kids say, right? If you're feeling any certain, I think it covers almost any type of feeling. I looked up Urban Dictionary before the podcast to make sure I got it right, because I want to say the right phrases. But I'm unwell, and it's giving. Stop sharing your journey as some sort of magic fix for people's lives. This fitness world needs to stop. I feel like we're struggling in the social media of being able to just share our journey versus like pretending like we're sharing it as some sort of advice, some clicks, some likes, some way that now people look at this as actual advice or some medical, opinion or something like that, right? I think Instagram has existed for a while now, and there was I've been using it since 2016. There was definitely a period where running Instagram was, hey, I did this run, I had this fun, sharing their experiences, sharing what they're going through. But we all knew that if Susie wrote that she, got a stress fracture and rubbed it with butter, and all of a sudden she felt okay, that was not a medical proven solution. It was just Susie's experience, and maybe she didn't have a stress fracture at all, because that literally wouldn't happen. Or maybe she's pretending like she's not in pain. But whatever it is, we just said, hey, Susie, that's great. Maybe some rest,
maybe
but also
do a wellness check on Susie. Hey, Susie, you missed the bagel. It landed on your foot. Maybe skip the butter next time and see a medical professional.
So it's just, I think there's a space to share so much in social media. We just need to be careful as a community. When we talk about fueling and we share it, we only take one gel. We have a large audience, and we say, well, my body's different than yours. If anyone responds, or we block, or we, delete, stop, block people from commenting or delete their comments. Like, that's not what this should be about. Like, if you want to share your behaviors that maybe are disordered or not, like, that's okay. But like, we should be able to have conversations about it. And like, you, just because you're have a large following and you're blocking and deleting people's comments, like, I don't know, I just feel like we've lost the bubble, we've lost the world here of what we're trying to do. This is like there you can share advice, you can share perspective, but it's yours. But when you start pushing it as like some fix or some way that's going to solve things for people, I think you're going on dangerous roads, especially like when it comes to fueling too. And like maybe keep that to yourself.
Yeah, I think it's a matter of it's a couple of things, but one of them is when I see a professional, whether they're very obviously to another professional in the field of fitness, running, health, etc., working outside their scope of practice or sharing, here's what I do kind of content, and like knowing that it's going to reach the masses, knowing that, hey, you know what? Let me stop myself. Maybe they don't know. And that right there for me is a red flag that that person doesn't have good judgment. I'm sorry.
Yep, that's that bullshit.
That's that
It's
bullshit.
back.
Better than
It
ever.
never left. It's always here.
It sure does. All right. That's cool.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Shall we move on to our topic du jour? So I think that's what the kids say.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know what kids you're hearing du jour from, but I'm here for that. Yeah, and I actually think it's a good segue treadway.
Oh, a treadway! We need a bell for that. Ding!
I'll ask my audio person about that.
All right, we'll get one first.
It's Nick, guys. It's Nick.
Yeah, it's Nick.
So speaking of talking about lived experience versus providing professional advice, I'm going to talk to you all today a little bit about me. And I want to start by stating a bit of a disclaimer to my story, my eating disorder story. And the story I'm about to share is my own recovery story. And the way in which I talk about eating disorders may startle some, because I use humor and I'm direct in my communication, which you already know because this is episode 10 of B2C, aka Between Two Coaches. And I would love for you all to stay with us in this conversation. But if any of that is not good for you, please skip this. Right, Coach?
Right on.
So these are my thoughts as somebody with an eating disorder who's worked with others going through eating disorders, but I'm not an expert. Again, it's my own lived experience. And this podcast episode is not going to mention numbers. It's not going to mention weight. It's not going to mention calories, etc. It's in part in an effort for me to remove this false narrative that we have around eating disorder. Eating disorders actually have very little to do with food itself or somebody's physical size. And what happens when we feed this false narrative is that people who actually need help, they don't get it. And formally, that means that health insurance will potentially deny them access to treatment because our healthcare system is incredibly
garbage.
Because they don't fall within a certain metric-driven criteria. And informally, well-intentioned people, our friends, our families, make incredibly reductive and inaccurate statements when somebody is struggling with disordered eating or an eating disorder. I've heard things like towards me and towards others with eating disorders, why can't you just eat the burger? Or for binge eating disorder, for example, I've heard somebody say to somebody going through that disorder, have you just tried tracking your macros? And that's how bullshit.
Yeah.
So for me personally, saying all that, I've dabbled in anorexia as well as phases of bulimia with laxatives, orthorexia, which is the obsession with health and ingredients and clean eating. And I've also had binge eating behaviors by ways of high volume, low calorie food. So I didn't experience, I'm just sharing all that to say to you, dear listener, that if you're going through something or you have, I either see you or I've probably experienced it myself. Um, and I didn't experience any like extreme childhood trauma that so many with lifelong mental health issues must work through, including those with eating disorders. So the unpacking of my issues is a little different. At an early age, I felt like a burden, especially around money, which you learn as you're going through your eating disorder recovery is actually there are many people and any addiction who have a challenging relationship money with financial security. And I very clearly remember, speaking of dance, we were just talking about dance before and how I have this, I was in dance school when I was a kid. So I was. And then my mom, being the amazing person she was, saw that I lacked a lot of confidence. And she didn't think that dance school was giving me more confidence. So she
Mm.
was like, we're going to put Amanda in martial arts.
Wow. It's a different type of thing altogether.
Yes, yes. She, you know, the woman was a high school principal in one of the toughest neighborhoods in New York City and was born in the Dominican Republic. So if you know my mother, this makes sense to you. um, and I remember seeing my father had given me a check because back in the day you wrote checks and you gave
I
them
know,
to
it's crazy.
your karate instructor. No, I know. And I remember just opening up the envelope because it wasn't sealed and seeing how much the sessions cost. I was mortified. I think I was 11 years old. And I even attempted to prematurely quit. Like I called my dad from the studio after I was done with that session. And the craziest thing was I never was told or taught in the home that money was an issue for us. I didn't grow up wealthy, but we always had what we needed. And um, it's just strange that that was something that I picked up. So I guess I didn't believe at 11 years old that I was worthy of that investment. Like when I look back, that must have been my mind. Like, why are they spending this money on me on something I enjoy? So that's actually something I've had to deal with
Yeah.
for, 30-ish years. So I felt like I had to hold on to what I had or accept what I was given and not ask for more and not express what I needed. In recovery, they talk a lot about like the scarcity mindset. And I feel like that's what it was for me.
So like you felt like your family didn't have the things necessarily to provide that, so you felt guilty like doing karate or other things that cost money?
Money, but also like resources.
Got it.
So I was not good, but an example is I played in middle school softball. I played basketball. My parents wanted me to engage in movement, right?
Yeah.
And I never told and not because I was bad. It also lasted in high school when I played lacrosse. I wasn't bad. I just didn't tell my parents when the games were because I knew they were both busy. And my sister also needed a lot of support. And I felt that. I felt that pressure. I just, it wasn't just around money, it was around time too.
Yeah.
And time is money, as we know.
That's that. Is are you the oldest? That feels like that oldest energy
Yeah.
right there.
Yeah. That is, you're right on. You're right on. So it was a lot of that and perfection, right? So seeming like I was totally okay with these things, not really bringing up issues and navigating middle school and high school and my 20s, just not having any time to, not dedicating any time to share with my parents how I was feeling. And to be fair, no one was really sharing how they were feeling in the house. So I felt like I could only rely on myself, so I did. And bringing you up to eating disorder story time, My first rock bottom looked like me collapsing in the hallway of my parents' apartment building where I was living with them at the time. I was walking from the elevator with my dad down the hall to our apartment in Queens. And I was around, it had to be 2013, 2014. I've honestly don't have the, as many of you know, or maybe you don't know, when you don't eat, our brain doesn't like to do the thing that it's supposed to do. The brain stops braining. I actually like I had a hard time as I was thinking back to like the timeline, what year I actually quote unquote hit that rock bottom, because I never went through a formal treatment at that time. So it had to have been about 10 years ago, maybe 11, actually 11 years ago. And at that time, even despite the fact that that had happened to me and that I had been at my lowest weight, my parents, and they did the best they could, but they still didn't have the tools or the words to say, like, you need help.
Yeah. I feel like that's hard. I mean, like, especially 10 years ago, like, I don't know. I feel like parents tend to side on the side of saying nothing versus like
Mm-hmm.
trying to say something that may make it worse. Like, I don't know. I feel like I don't know, maybe parents aren't always aware, but like being somewhat aware of what's going on into this, but like not knowing what to do. So just being like, oh, whatever. Like, let's not talk about it.
Yeah, no, right on. I'm in no way blame them. I also know that, and this is something that my mom has shared openly in her small audiences, or I was a part of a youth group growing up, and she actually came to speak to the youth group about her uh, decade long battle with multiple eating disorders. So she's somebody who considered herself recovered, and I'm going to talk more about this later, but in a lot of ways, disordered behaviors were still showing up in my home. And it wasn't intentional, but as many folks know who are in their process of therapy in the work, and there are people who believe there's a finish line to recovery, and then there are the rest of us who know that sometimes the behaviors just exist in a different it's a different it's the same game, it's
Yeah.
just a different team. I don't know what the analogy is there, guys. Okay,
No,
I
but
said I wasn't good at sports. I said I wasn't good at sports.
but no, I hear that. Like, you know, and while it's not the same, I had ADHD growing up, and you know, I remember joking once. My wife's a therapist and in social work, and I remember joking with her once that I was like, "My mom told me I beat ADHD," and she's like, "She did, huh?" She's like, "Good for you," but no, like, and so like, does it show up the same at age 42 as it did when I was 14, 10, 11, 12?
Mm.
No, but like, there's still that behavior there, and you know, now some of my kids get those you know, nurture versus nature, but some of those get them too, and like I can see it and I'm like, that was me. So like, it's it's always a thing, right? Like you don't just beat it, but like you can get past it, so you're living and living a livable life with these things. Like some people use ADHD as a crutch, like I can't do anything, because it's like you can, you just it's like anything else, it's something you have to work through.
And it's that also ties to the eating disorder world, because one thing I that you just lit up in my mind is there are so many people I see like so closely identifying with their eating disorder that they almost are stunting their recovery, which is interesting for me.
Yeah.
Again, I said I was going to be real today. I'm going to be real today. So yeah, so that was the first time. It was around 2013, and at that point, I knew that I needed to eat. And I didn't know anything else. I was like, I needed to eat more. So my weight was restored. If you speak to somebody in nutrition or dietetics, they may say that I was nutritionally rehabilitated. So am I recovered now? Then I started like that's what I kept thinking. Like, am I going to be recovered now because I'm eating? Funny thing about that is that's when I started to take laxatives by necessity, and then it turned into habit because you got to go to the bathroom. And if you're not eating, even though you are weight restored, you may still have challenges going to the bathroom. By the way, this is a TMI podcast. So if this ain't the one for you, you can skip right through. So that was fun. Just again, like you were saying, eating disorder moves from restriction and what some may classify as anorexia to abuse of laxatives as a way to not only go through bowel movements, but reduce my weight, like keep my weight in check. That's that bullshit.
Yeah.
So somewhere in there, I actually started to engage in fitness because you may be listening to this thus far and you're like, did she exercise during this time? And I actually didn't. There are some people who are experiencing eating disorders or disordered behaviors and it's around movement and exercise. I actually wasn't the one. That wasn't one for me. I first started exercising in a pretty joyful way, 2014 ish. And it wasn't tied to earning or burning. I was doing Zumba classes with my mom.
Zumba.
I was kickboxing. I was joining Lucille Roberts. I was living my best life. I also at the time I was transitioning into a higher stress role. So all these years would pass and I was engaging in group fitness, and the thoughts around control and rigidity and scarcity were still there, but at least I weighed enough so that people could say that I looked healthy again. So that's the other problem with looking at somebody and being able to tell if they have a disorder.
Yeah.
The thoughts were still there. They weren't as strong because, again, the brain was starting to brain. I was eating, but I was engaging in disordered behaviors. So the second rock bottom would be acknowledged by one of my closest friends. At that point, I was living in the city, and she actually showed up to my apartment saying that she needed to talk. That's when I was like, I got to do something about this because they're noticing.
A tough conversation for a friend.
She is still my very best friend.
Oh.
So she did the best she could, and she had the tools, and she took them out of the toolbox. She said, girl, I'm going to put a wrench on this bad boy until you tell me you're going to get some help. And that was the right move. And she didn't have the answers, which I appreciate so much. She wasn't like, let's get you in a treatment. She didn't know anything. So at that point, that's when I went to my first 12-step program at a treatment center here in New York City. I didn't ask at that point, by the way, I was not asking my family for any support. I did let my boss know why I would be leaving the office on Mondays at 5:30. But my parents, I didn't. Again, and this is going back to what we were going over earlier, I still very much was hyper independent, felt like I was a burden. So if I asked them for help with this, whether that was financial or emotional or them calling to check in on me, this was my problem. I had to deal with it. And that's what I thought. So, and side note, once I found out, despite existing at an incredibly low weight again, it was not low enough for in or outpatient treatment. Because again, our healthcare system, what is it?
Garbage.
That's
crazy though, too.
It's crazy. And I'm not going to give specifics, but it's crazy. And it's easier to get treatment in a thin body, which, dear listener, if you're listening to this, I exist with thin privilege. It's easier to be accepted by society in a thin body. And it still wasn't covered by insurance in any capacity. So that's that bullshit. So to bring you up to speed, I'm very open about my story in the ways that I've shared it. And there are a few reasons. But there are definitely reasons why eating disorders are tricky to talk about. And I'm of the belief that one is never fully recovered from an eating disorder, despite treatment centers or maybe people on the internet selling it as so. So I'm very cautious in sharing my story by saying, like, I want better now. I'm not, that Bo is not going to be a part of this conversation or that finish line, whatever analogy you need to hear it. What I will say is that I do not engage in eating disorder behaviors. I have an incredibly strong relationship with fueling my body for not only performance, but for life. I have a solid relationship with movement and exercise. And all that to say that eating disorder voice will still come up, but I know how to manage it because I really benefited from 12-step programs, and I benefited from being a sponsee, and I benefited from sponsoring others, and it's informed who I am as a fitness professional who considers herself eating disorder informed.
Yeah.
So that's the bow.
Yeah, I mean that's the way it works, right? Like it's not like these things are a part of us, right? Like the trauma is always there, right? Like we have these past traumas and they exist and they're a part of who we are, but we learn to grow with them and how to react when they come up. And that's all part of a journey, right? And so, I think that is where everyone should strive for in the end. It's not like I I beat it and it'll never come up again. That's not how anything works in life. Like these feelings can always come up. We can get triggered by things. It's how do we exist in that world or know how to remove ourselves from situations that are troublesome until we can exist in that world?
Yes. And we were talking about off camera, off mic earlier, how I really navigating being somebody who's experienced an eating disorder while working in the fitness industry and the running industry is it's a whole other conversation. And I have many, many opinions. Many opinions, binders full of opinions. And I will save that for another time if time allows for us to do so. So I do want to make sure that we highlight some other things. So here are some hard truths about eating disorders. Eating disorders are complex mental health disorders, and they kill people. Okay, they thrive in isolation. So in a time right now where there are so many of us, especially in a post-pandemic world, who are still existing behind screens and not getting out in the community as much, working from home. I remember the pandemic being a time that I was really worried for the addiction community because meetings were canceled and therapy went virtual. And it's in a lot of ways expanded the reach of therapy and therapeutic practices, but it's also kept people away from other people. And that's not good for eating disorders, and it's not good for any addiction. Eating disorders are competitive as hell. Oftentimes, those with eating disorders believe they're not sick enough. You may even see those in what we call quasi recovery share before and after photos to show how recovered they are. Again, eating disorders are mental health disorders. Hear that again. Eating disorders are mental health disorders. You can't see someone's mental health. So not only can't someone look like they have an eating disorder, but also you can't look recovered from one either. I feel like this idea, again, this may be controversial, we were saying it, full recovery is a myth. It's kind of like a unicorn. There's no weight you hit or pant size you hit or before and after photo that's going to tell the people around you, hi, I've arrived at recovery land. Where the fuck's my medal? And I don't think I realized this until after I went through the 12 steps of recovery. And I really had the audacity to think, once I go through this, all the feelings thoughts, behaviors, issues just going to disappear. And that ED voice was like, the fuck it will. Right?
Yeah.
Right. So the other thing is that people who don't want help can't be helped yet. And that's something to keep in mind if you're somebody who thinks that someone in your life may have an eating disorder. If they don't want help, they can't be helped yet. And that's okay.
Yeah, I feel like there's like these two sides of people, like one who are like, I want to step in and save the day and, be there. And then there's others who are like very cautious of like, I don't want to say the wrong thing and like make person worse or just make them spy. So, like I think that's hard for people. And like they end up most of the
Yeah.
time either going too far in either direction and they isolate someone by not being there at all, or they go so deep and they're like, we're going to drive you there right now. And it's like, okay, like what, again, like we don't need to all or nothing people. Like we need to be supportive and understanding.
Especially because there's such one of the eating disorders and disordered behaviors. A lot of people think in their mind, this is fiction, by the way, that the population are like middle school and high school. This is only hitting middle school, high school white women. No. Statistically, no. White thin women, I should say. No, that's not the case. That's not the case. There are people who are existing, and I know them personally, in their 20s and 30s and 40s and 50s and 60s and 70s and 80s. And they are male and they are female and they are identifying in other ways and they are gay and they are straight and they are living in thin bodies and they are living in fat bodies and they are living in everywhere in between bodies, and it does not discriminate. So, one answer to that, just to cut myself off, is if you know somebody who you think needs support, just be a good friend, and you don't have to make an accusation or have an answer or have the book ready and the bus ready to go and drive them to the treatment center. But be like, hey, Nick, I've been thinking of you. How are things going?
Oh, thanks for asking. Okay.
Yeah, tell me more about that.
Mm.
You don't have to be a therapist, right? I'm not going to therapize Nick. I'm going to listen to Nick and I'm going to continue to follow up with Nick. And I'm going to tell Nick, I just want you to know that I've noticed you've been going through a hard time and that I'm here for you in any way that I can be. Is that okay with you?
It is.
Do you need a hug?
I always need a hug though, to be honest.
Okay, well, you have to come to the city because I'm not getting up right now. I'm too hot.
No, you're right. Listening, that's the simple behavior. Like if you listen to someone and you follow up, like they're more willing to share like that thing that they don't tell anyone. Versus like if you're accusative, got it, or other ways with people where you're pushing them away because you feel like you're trying to fix some situation. Like people just want to be listened to. Sometimes people just want to have that, person who's following up and checking in and listening and you know in within reason too. Like if you over check in you can be bad too, even if you have good intentions, but just listening, right? That's the key of what you're trying to get there.
Yes. I will also add 12-step programs. The one that I was in was based on balance. So it's called Eating Disorders Anonymous. And there are actually a few food related anonymous groups that exist in 12-step recovery programs. This one has the most balance. That's what I will say. And it is free. Many of these meetings, you can check with the website, which I will make sure is in the show notes. Even though anonymous groups they don't they don't need or desire to be marketed or promoted. I think it's worth sharing with our listeners that there are groups like Eating Disorders Anonymous and other free support groups that are open to family members or friends or people who want to support somebody in their life who may have an eating disorder. And I think that's another place that some of our loved ones can go if they are struggling to find the words. So that is what I will say about that. I also don't think people understand that eating disorders make people believe they're safe, and moreover, that they're in control in both themselves, situations, and the people around. When we know that that couldn't be further from the truth. The other thing that I see on the internet, I see it less now, but it still holds, it still exists. Intuitive eating doesn't fix eating disorders. Eating in general, eating disorders are not cured with eating.
Yeah, I've noticed that.
So, yeah, you see that you still see that, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. So, like I was sharing earlier, for me personally, my lived experience, the way that I continue to fight the good fight against any sort of eating disorder voice that may appear, it's is I have to constantly challenge disordered behaviors that are normalized actually in our society. So for me, that means taking rest days. That full week of rest felt real good after my half marathon.
Yeah, we love that rest.
We love the rest. That means fueling my workouts. That means not pushing through pain. How I talk about exercise is also, I try to be as balanced as possible, acknowledging that we can have aesthetic based goals that aren't driven by shrinking myself or function and performance, right? So those are the ways that I personally have found a lot of value.
And those are your things, right? So you mentioned earlier, like, this recovery world is like, I'm done, here's my medal. But like, reality is you found ways to act and to absorb and to listen to your body and the things that would trigger you before and how to react to them in those moments. And you do these things so you don't, fall back into old ways. And so, you're speaking positively in certain ways, you're doing things that could lead you down a bad path. Like, these are the things that are helping ultimately to help you stay where you're at.
I agree with you. I'll wrap this up. Well, it doesn't have to be a full wrap up, but a semi wrap up. I want to make sure that people who are supporting someone in need, whether that's their daughter, their son, their loved one, their partner, or maybe it's themselves, have some tangible ways to move forward. Let's start with patience. Recovery isn't linear, and that can be really irritating. You got to accept it though. I would tell someone you trust who can help you find the support you need. Again, the expectation is not that your parent, your guardian, your best friend has the specific answers, but let them know that you're in pain and that it's impacting your life beyond what they are seeing, because that would be the truth. And that could be, again, that could be in a 12-step program or other support meeting. Maybe it's outpatient or inpatient treatment, depending on the severity. There's also meal support groups, independent living groups, depending on your financial situation. There is something out there for you. I would say this is very fresh in my mind, and it'll be a grievance for another time, is that if you are engaging in exercise, please engage responsibly. If you're working with a medical team, they should guide this. But more recently, I have been the one to have to tell people who have reached out to me as a potential trainer of theirs or coach of theirs that it actually may not be in their best interest right now to engage in exercise. Nevertheless, I digress. Another grievance, another episode. You need to be really selective about the trainers you work with, the run coaches you work with, the group fitness classes you take, because there is no formal eating disorder training that the fitness industry has. There was a time in Coach Amanda's life where she was writing a curriculum for one, but she had to take a pause on that. But maybe that's something that I do in the future. You have to be selective, and you may not know who is safe to reach out to. And just like when you find a therapist, you do have to date around. So if I could be of any support in that way, again, my opinions are my own. I'm happy to be a support to anyone listening. Not to sell myself as the trainer or the coach, because that's not what that's about, but to help you in seeing the green flags in a potential trainer for you or a coach, identifying the red flags, which we actually have an episode on, so maybe you want to listen to that. Anything that you would add about that, Nick? Because I would very much consider you an eating disorder informed fitness professional.
Yeah. I'll say a little bit, right? So, as someone who has never formally dealt with an eating disorder, I'll say wasn't something on my radar a lot as a college athlete around male athletes, even post collegiately. That, in the male world of that time, I'm talking like 2000 to 2008, my college years and post, it wasn't really something talked about. Like, but now with all the knowledge I have looking back, I can definitely see tons of disordered eating, tons of this probably being very, you know, around even in the males at the time, but it wasn't, toughness and everything was talked about in the male community. And it was never a thing that anyone would bring up. Right. And so a lot of my journey until I became a coach was, oh, I know this exists. I don't know who is around who might have it. I've been around a lot of males who seem fine, right? And so it wasn't something observed. And then I became a coach and learned a lot more about it and learned how to sort of, be that ally for people, be that support for people, right? And so, for me, when athletes disclose that, as a coach, like it's listening, it's like helping them make decisions, helping them make sure that we're doing the right things. It's fueling long runs, right? Like for runners, like when you see behaviors around it where we are taking gels and then feeling crappy late in runs, you know, again, it's not making assumptions, but it's just little things for me to note of why is this happening? Let's talk about fueling. Let's talk about long runs. Let's talk about why we only had one gel for 16 miles and, did that multiple times, right? And just sort of listening to answers, right? I think for me, what I've learned about working with athletes and just being this ally is listening, right? Like I try not to make assumptions. I try never to, think, oh, this is what's happening. But by talking to people and having a conversation, not being afraid of the conversation because you're coming at it with a supportive, you know, type behavior, and listening, and athletes are more willing to share and tell you what's going on over time. Like again, like you said, patience. I don't expect the first conversation to be like, oh yeah, this is why this is happening. But just for me, it's been a lot of acknowledging what I don't know, trying to learn, having this, I really appreciate you sharing this conversation today. And this was a big for us on Between Two Coaches. I really wanted to make sure Amanda had this platform to share this journey. And I really wanted to like hear it from this side and like listen to my friend talk. And I learned a lot. And these are the kinds of conversations that you as a coach or you as a friend or you as someone could learn a lot in having difficult or listening to conversations of people going through said traumas, right? And it's easier to avoid and never talk about it with anyone than you're not growing yourself, right? And so today for me was I got to hear a lot. I got to learn a lot. I'm a more informed person because of you being so willing to share. And I very much appreciate it.
This is why I hate him. Do you understand now why I hate him? Are you listening, dear listener? Because he's going to pull the emotions out of me.
That's what I do.
I appreciate that I now have a space to share something that's not only important to me, but is becoming more and more important to hear in our industry, not only as people who love our sports, love running, love exercising, but also on the professional side. And what Nick said before is really important. If you're a fitness professional, if you're a run coach, if you're a physical therapist, even honestly, if you're a registered dietitian who's any professional who works with people and you're not an eating disorder specialist, no one is expecting you to diagnose and you should not be, diagnose your clients with eating disorders. No, no, no. What Nick highlighted is he's a good ass human and he's a really, really phenomenal coach because he provides a safe space for those conversations to happen and he sees the signs and he helps direct that conversation. So be like Nick.
Oh, thanks, Amanda. And like having resources to know where to go to, right? Like, I'm not the expert in a lot of things, but when that happens, I know who I can send my athletes to talk if we do get to a point where they're sharing and I don't have the answers. You can still be a supportive person to anyone. Like, you can still listen. You can get out of your comfort zone and have these conversations with people, right? And again, when we started this podcast, Amanda, we said this is, we're gonna no BS. We're gonna talk about the stuff that's important. And here's episode 10, and we're having this conversation because to us, this is an important thing in the industry, right? And so, we're coaches, we're sharing experiences. This was a very Amanda episode because we wanted to have Amanda share something very personal, and that was basically the point of this. And I hope you walk away with a lot of knowledge. I hope you walk away with hearing some things that maybe were hard. I hope you walk away with just feeling more informed yourself, and that a conversation was had between people where someone really shared a lot of vulnerable stuff. And that is literally life in a nutshell. That is the point of having people in your life to listen and share with.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Is it time to wrap this episode up?
Did we do it?
We done did it.
We did it. Yes, I think it's time.
Thank you so much for joining us. Hope you enjoyed this episode and that you got something out of it. Reach out to us at any time on the gram or at Between Two Coaches. That's TWOcoaches@gmail.com. And we'll see you next time.
Bye.